Hey, Joe with SnapFab here. I'm going to show you in this video a real basic tutorial on hammer forming. Basically what that entails is creating a buck and hammering a sheet of metal around it to get the desired shape. What I'm doing here today is very simple, very basic, but it is the kind of the essentials of hammer forming. The part that I'm going to make is round in shape, and it's going to be made out of this aluminum. This piece of MDF that I've cut here has a slight radius on the edge, which is what I want to have happen to my aluminum. I want it to follow that radius and create a soft edge on the perimeter of this disc. So there's basically only three components to this process. We've got the buck that the metal will be shaped around, the piece of metal, and this other disc of MDF, which will basically sandwich the part within the two pieces to keep it flat while I shape this edge around the buck that I've created. All three parts have a hole in the center of them so that they'll all line up centered. I'm going to drop a 1/4 inch bolt through there and tighten it down, and then we'll get to the hammering part of it. So that comes up next. Duh. Okay, so our two pieces of MDF and aluminum are sandwiched together with this 1/4 inch bolt. Again, the top disc is to keep the material flat against the bottom buck as I'm shaping. If I didn't do that, since what we're going to be doing is shrinking this edge to make it follow this radius, if I didn't have this top disc on there, we'd really distort this top surface in the shrinking process here, just by the stress that we're adding to this piece of aluminum in the shrinking process. So that's why this top disc should be there. Of course, like I said, this is very, very basic as far as this part's concerned. Different parts that you're making, the way that your parts are clamped together, it's going to be different from one job to the next, but this is just very basic, very simple. As I alluded to, we're going to be shrinking this edge around this radius of this buck here. So really all we're going to do is start using a hammer and start beating this edge down. And I'm just going to go all the way around, not trying to get it to match the profile completely all the way around, but just get the material started. Okay, now as I've made my way around the piece once here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it necessarily on the camera. Maybe I can get some reflections to pop up there, but you'll see that occasionally there's one of these little bumps that show up there, and that is a tuck is starting to develop right there. If you've watched any of my other metal shaping videos that involve shrinking, I've talked about tucks before, and that's what we're going to see happen and what we want to have happen to get this edge to shrink. Every time we create a tuck, that's our opportunity to shrink the material in on itself so it'll follow this radius and give us a smooth finished part. So as I keep working my way around, these little tucks are going to pop up and they're going to get more defined, and when that happens, those are going to be the parts of the material that we're going to be concentrating more effort on to get them flat as it shrinks the material in on itself, working our way around. So with another pass or two around it, you'll see there's a couple of these tucks that have gotten more and more pronounced, and that's just the material forcing you're forcing it to go somewhere it doesn't want to be. So it's that stress is pushing the material to gather, but that's okay because we're going to hammer those flat. This is 1/16 inch aluminum, so it's very easy to manipulate in a scenario like this where we'll get it to shape around this radius and get flat against the buck without too much effort. If this flange that I was shrinking was deeper, we'd have a lot more work to do. If it's steel, obviously that's going to be requiring a little more work, but I'm just going to keep working my way around. I'm probably going to hit these tucks a little bit more this time around to try to get rid of them, and then we'll work on getting this edge to touch all the way around this buck. And what I've just done right here is I've hammered on either side of this tuck to do what's called trapping the tuck, because if I were to just hit that tuck with the hammer, it would most likely push that stress, you know, one direction or the other, and the tuck would just move. So what I'm trying to do is trap it so it can't move. Got the material here on either side of this tuck basically touching the buck here. So this tuck, as I start to hammer it flat, really it shouldn't go anywhere. It may move, it may make it lift off this buck a little bit on either side, but that's okay. We can come back in and flatten it out, but I'm going to try to concentrate on getting that tuck flat right now. It flattened out pretty well and didn't seem to really distort the edge that I had flattened against the buck too bad. So I'm pretty happy with the way that one's coming out. Now this tuck, I didn't trap it since I had another tuck really close to it. I flattened it out right away, and it pushed that stress a little bit. So I'm just going to keep chasing that towards this other tuck. So basically these two tucks, I pushed them together, so I only had to work on trying to get one of them out. That one came out real easy there. Now, I've made my way all the way around, and there's no big tucks peeking out the side there. And going around, I can see that my aluminum is touching pretty much all the way around the buck. There's a couple spots that it's not, so I'll just work my way around with another pass. I'm not hitting this real hard because this is wood, so I can damage it if I try to shrink too hard on this, but I can keep tapping, make my way around. Well, that is, it's touching just about everywhere. So that basically, that edge all the way around has been shrunk. There's not a lot of shrink that happened here because it's not a real drastic curve, and there's not much of a flange going on here. You know, this type of shrinking, it's effective, but of course there's going to be limits to it. If I had a 2-inch flange here, this buck wouldn't do the job. I'd have to look at a different shrinking technique to get that material shrunk down, then maybe place it over a buck like this. The buck would have to be, you know, deeper as well to take up the material of that flange, and then use my hammers to form it and smooth that surface. But for something like this, this is really effective to create a smooth radius, keep the shape, the size that you need it based on the buck that you're shaping around. I'm going to adjust the camera a little closer here so I can show you a little bit better how nicely that fit that buck. Okay, here we can see that the aluminum is shaped around this buck really tight. I mean, there's no, from the underside here, there's no visible gaps where the aluminum is not touching the surface of my buck, so that I know basically this radius is pretty well dialed in all the way around from the hammer forming. There's not a lot of shrink going on here, but there's enough of it that clamping the material between two blocks like this is really pretty effective to make a part that nice and that quickly. I actually have more time into making the tooling basically than I do making the part, and that's typically always the case. The work leading up to creating the part usually takes more time than making the part itself. Just ask a machinist. Setup and tooling is where all of the labor is. Cutting the part rarely is the most expensive part. It's the prep leading up to making the part. So there's that. I'm going to end up taking this part out of this buck here. Matter of fact, we'll just do that right now. And you can see, taking that top plate off of here, my surface of my part is still flat. And it fits. It's fitting so well that it doesn't want to come off right away. There we go. So there is our buck, and now here is our part. The nice shrunk radius edge. Just creates a very clean part. What I'll end up doing is I need a bit of a dome in this part, so what I'll end up doing is taking this to my planishing hammer and putting a little bit of a shape to it. Now that I've got the hard part, shrinking this edge done, and then I'll end up just welding that hole shut when I weld this on the other piece of aluminum that it's going to get married to. So there you go. Really basic hammer forming. If you didn't ever know what hammer forming was, I hope now you do, and that this video is helpful. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to type them in the comments. If there's something else you want to see, don't hesitate to ask. And as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe, share, comment, thumbs up, all that good stuff. You know how it goes. Thanks.